Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram @From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Now I'm going to turn you over to your host, Shane Grove.
Welcome, everybody, to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and me and the judge are awfully close tonight to bring this podcast to you. How close are we, Judge?
We're way too close.
We're way too close.
We're way too close.
What kind of fine would I receive in your court?
This is, I'll tell you what, this is one of those clearly disorderly conduct.
Okay, I'll take that. I can shake that off my record at some point, maybe. Jason, the producer, where are you at tonight? Yell at us.
I am in Mansfield, Ohio right now. Greetings, everybody.
Ohio. Lovely Mansfield, Ohio. So we're super excited tonight because our host is probably not only one of the most accomplished hosts we've had when it comes to the paranormal cryptid field. She probably is the best looking.
I thought Jason was.
Jason, okay. Well, Jason, maybe Jerry, but she's definitely, definitely. Well, thank God Jerry's nowhere around because he would try to tackle a picture of her.
Yes.
Joining us tonight from, where are you at? Are you in Las Vegas?
Yes, sir.
Las Vegas is Shannon LeGro. Shannon, how are you doing this evening?
Hello, gents. Can I just say I'm a little bummed that we're only doing Skype audio and not video after the picture that you painted of the way that you guys are sitting to execute this interview.
For those of you who just tuned in, Grover and I are sharing the same. Well, we were talking off the record.
Yeah.
Let's just put this in a visual for you.
Yes, we're sharing the same. He has one bud and I have the other, and they're
earbud.
Yeah, you might want to say earbuds because
yeah,
when
true.
you say headphones, that would mean that your other pair of ears would be together, like literally smushed together.
We have a pair of Beats that we're sharing.
Yes.
That's a great ad campaign for Beats. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's not a size, unless we got Shaq's Beats that could fit over.
So, hey, everybody, we're excited. We have Shannon with us tonight. Shannon is an author. She
has her own podcast.
She has her own podcast that I was a guest on. It's fabulous. Go check it out. It's called Into the Fray. And Shannon, we're excited to have you here tonight.
She's also like a TV and movies.
Oh, she's been on. I saw her on TV one night. She was on TV. So, Shannon, introduce yourself to our listeners, if you don't mind.
I don't know about that star stuff. You made me itchy when you said the TV star, but yeah, I got to do a doc with a couple docs with Seth Breedlove, which is amazing. So hello everybody, and thank you guys so much for having me on. I have a podcast called Into the Fray, which started in 2015, and a lot of your listeners, which I know a lot of them are new listeners from this very show that I started on, which would be Sasquatch Chronicles. Huge high five to Wes for he's really the one that kind of gave me my start in podcasting. I would not have Into the Fray if it was not for Wes giving me my start there. So I always credit him for that. But yeah, I've been doing Into the Fray, which is a multi-topic podcast since 2015, and then have recently got into finally authoring some books and actually publishing some books with G. Michael Hopf, best-selling author, and the title of our company is Beyond the Fray Publishing. Quite fitting, I suppose. So yeah, it's been quite the ride. And I feel very lucky to be doing what I'm doing and get to talk to like-minded folks every single week, much like you guys.
So a burning question that always people ask is, what on earth got you started? Why the paranormal? Why cryptozoology? Why ufology? What piqued your interest to make you want to do this?
Why not true crime that pays so much better in the podcasting world?
Does it really? It does seem like sometimes when you look on like a Patreon or something, maybe the judge can attest to this or answer that question, right? But some of those true crime podcasts, you're going, does that say you make $50,000 a month? You know, and you're kind of going, holy smokes, maybe I am in the wrong field.
Have you ever checked out the last podcast on the left?
I have.
I'm kind of jealous.
A little bit, right? We'll
So
get there, guys.
Give us your origin story, Shannon. Give us your origin story.
Yes, so the origin story. So as much as I love Bigfootery and talking about the big guy, that's probably my favorite subject. That's not where I got my start. I was a teenager, probably about 12, 13 maybe, tops. And my dad had a cabin out in Duck Creek, Utah. And it's about 3.5 hours from Vegas. A lot of people from Vegas would go out there. They got cabins, they do fishing, all the outdoorsy stuff. And at that age, me and my brothers, my brother and stepbrother, besides fishing, what we loved to do was ride four-wheelers. It was either fishing or four-wheelers. That's it. And on this particular day, my dad had gone down into Cedar City, and we wanted to ride our four-wheelers, so we did. And I'm going to say this next part because people that have ever ridden a motorcycle or a dirt bike or a four-wheeler will know, if you don't wear your helmet with those terrible goggles that don't have actual glass, because that would be stupid to have glass in those, you can't see really a whole lot. So because our dad was down in Cedar City, at least I didn't wear my helmet. I honestly can't remember if my brothers did or not, but people will understand why that's important here in a minute. But the way that the cabins are set up here on this hill in Duck Creek is it's a grid pattern. So you can kind of haul, down some of these roads with no problem. And there wasn't a lot of traffic. It's not that kind of place. So it's middle of the day, clear day, and it's in the summer. And we're riding down this dirt road. And because I didn't have my helmet on, I was hanging back from my brothers because the dust kicking up in your face is unpleasant. So at some point I look off to my right and I see, and I'm moving at a good clip, and about 20 to 30 yards maybe into the woods is 4 absolutely pitch black, talking the blackest black and then somehow darker than that. Very hard to describe that, but it's the best way that I've ever been able to do so, is 4 what we now call shadow people, shadow figures. But to me as a kid, basically, I was just like, oh, what in the... That is very strange. Look at those people. But within like 2 seconds, I'm like, those are not people. And they're running, keeping pace with me. And the odd thing was their arms and legs were moving, even though I registered very quickly that I didn't know why they would even really need to do that. Because it's like they were running as if the trees weren't even there. And that's hard to describe also because it's not like I saw them moving through the trees per se. It's just they were running as if they were not there. I know that probably you're probably going, that makes no sense.
They didn't have to like sidestep or juke to get around a tree.
No jumping over anything on the ground. No, ducking or diving or dodging. None of that. No dodgeball acronyms were in there at all.
And how far do you think from sitting on your four-wheeler, how far do you think away these things were?
20 to 30 yards, like max. But I only watched, I watched them for a 5 count, which is actually a pretty good clip to see something. Judge, you know exactly what I'm talking
Right.
about. If you actually count out 5, like that's a pretty long
That's
time.
a good distance on a 4-wheeler. If you're hauling butt, a count of 5 is actually a pretty long distance.
Yeah. And I'm watching these things, and, you know, if they had faces, I don't think I would have known because they were that dark. I didn't get the inclination that they saw me or noticed me. I just felt like I was watching something kind of moving in the woods, just on its own volition, not really part of this world, basically. So I watch it for 5 seconds. Of course, I'm moving on my 4-wheeler. I need to check my path. I look in front of me. I quickly look back, and they are just gone, completely gone. And they had been paralleling me that entire 5 seconds, by the way. So I catch up to my brothers. I'm like, okay, dudes, we need to go back to the cabin. I'm just kind of freaked out. I saw something. My dad gets back to the cabin, and I told him what I saw. And he's ex-military, and, you know, he's kind of a little bit of a no-nonsense kind of guy. And he just said, oh, they do military exercises up here all the time. They're just guys in, you know, military garb. I'm like, adamant. I'm like, no, Dad, these were not people. These were not human beings. And still to this day, he remembers me telling him that. And he's still to this day, he goes, I don't really quite believe you. And I'm like, that's okay. But yeah, still to this day, he says he doesn't quite believe me. But, you know, I didn't really talk about it too much after that. I remember talking to some of my friends about, oh, you know, if they bring up something weird in their house, I'll go, oh, really? You know, and I remember it being an interest long ago, ever since then. But it wasn't really.
So you're like one of the people, like my situation, when I was a kid, I didn't run around volunteering what I saw because,
right.
Well, you tell the one person who you think's going to believe you, your father, and he says, I just flat out don't believe you.
Yeah.
Now imagine having a jerk friend like Grove. If I would have told him,
No, wait a second.
He'd be the worst.
Just been ridiculed. I mean, they would have roasted me.
Yeah, if Grove was there, I mean, he probably wouldn't have let you in that house, though. He probably would have just laughed and left you out back or something, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Listen, when we get to talking about the judge's story, we'll talk about who the jerk was. Okay, we'll talk about who the jerk was. So, like you finished your.
So Shannon,
did it have backwards knees or?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that these things were paralleling you. They were pacing you. But you're saying that you didn't get the impression that they were actually trying to pace you, that you were just observing an event that happened and they weren't really cognizant of you being there.
That's how I felt. Like if I had to peg it one or the other, I would be settled in that category because it's not, they didn't, you know, look over or wave or give me any inclination that they realized I was there. Maybe they did and they just ignored me. But I really just, when I describe it, I just feel like I glimpsed into, you know, another part of our kind of world that just lives alongside of us. What those really were, I don't know. And of course, especially since I had been on Sasquatch Chronicles, I had people go, well, maybe they were Bigfoot. And I'm like, no, that, you know, I don't try to quantify it in that realm at all. They were, you know, around 6 feet tall. They weren't super duper skinny or emaciated, but they were thinner, and they were literally like just cutouts from the deepest, darkest night. You know, there was no fur or they didn't even look natural in any way, shape, or form.
It didn't look like they were wearing like they were wearing garments or anything like that.
No.
They were just a solid black as pitch.
Yeah.
Like stick man, but not stick, just like regular proportions to a human.
And you know, and thinking back, you know, I would be like, why in the world would things like that even fake that they had to move, you know, their arms if they were running like a person would, you know, which is so strange to me. But maybe they did. I don't know. I really don't know what that was. But that's my inception story.
So from that, it would sound like to me that your interest in the unknown or the paranormal, or, you know, like I always said that, you know, there really are things that go bump in the night, or maybe there really are things that are hiding in the shadows, or even worse, lurking under your bed, and that's why you have to jump to get in and not leave your arm hang over.
That's a real thing. Yeah, you got to keep the limbs tucked in, man. Yeah, but that's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. You never know. But something that, and as I said, it's a good point that you brought up. It is so different. My experience out in the woods, and it's a total one-off. Never seen a shadow person again. It's so different to see them in the woods versus in your own home. I mean, that's on the no list for me. You're supposed to feel safe in your home, and just take those guys and put them in my house. I'd be probably trying, to move after, of course, trying to capture them on film and all of that stuff for the good of the show and the good of the paranormal community. But it's a big no on my list when they start messing with you in your own house.
So, but you don't think they were trying to mess with you? You just think you just
No.
happen to be an observer to an event?
Yeah, I really do. And I could be totally wrong about that. But yeah, I just think it was a crazy one-off thing that I just happened to glimpse for those 5 seconds.
So from that, you just delved into other topics. You've already mentioned that your favorite topic is the Sasquatch Bigfoot, and you ended up on Sasquatch Chronicles, and absolutely thanks to Wes. So what's
now you're kind of glossing over that.
Oh.
Okay, I mean,
well,
you're kind of going like, so she went from 12 years old on a four-wheeler to now talking to us.
Well, yeah.
I mean, we did like so. So at what point did you decide? I mean, at what point in your life were you like, okay, I want to get into talking about that? So I'm assuming you saw those things and you kind of wanted to figure out what they were, what that experience was. Maybe not right then at 12 or 13, but maybe like the judge, you got to a point where you look back and tried to, maybe wondered what those things were. I mean, is that what happened, or is it just something you always wanted to do?
I mean, I think that it very much was the, when you're laughing about just glancing over it, it's darn near like that, though, because it was basically about 30 years before I really, really started to dive into stuff again or talk about my experience again. And, I would, like I said, I would talk to some of my friends about some weird stuff, but it wasn't like it was a real crazy passion or anything. And then I discovered podcasts, I don't know, 10 years ago, whatever it was, 12 years ago. And all that I consumed was Bigfoot podcasts. And, a lot of people in Bigfoot, of course, the main reason to get into Bigfoot is to have a sighting. I've had incredible auditory experiences, and some things happened while I was out Bigfooting that has me convinced that there actually may be something out there. And we can get into that later if you want to. But there's the sighting. There is, movies like Legend of Boggy Creek or, Harry and the Hendersons or something like that. I don't remember my lightning moment for particularly Bigfoot, to be honest with you. But I just know that I fell in love with it. I started listening to every podcast I could. And then I started to finally use Facebook for the first time. I had an account for years, but I always hated it. Still do sometimes. I'm sure you guys do too. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right? No, of course not. To be anonymous again. No, but I started to just kind of go, okay, well, screw it. I'll come out of the cryptid closet and the paranormal closet, and I'll just wear my freak flag, patch on my arm and just go for it. And I started to join every Bigfoot group I could find. And of course, SC. And I started to become really, really active in that group, and Wes and I started to talk, and then that's how I ended up on Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes and Will, of course, at the time.
Now, I mean, were you on there to talk about like some of your close Bigfoot experiences, or just to talk about how did you get on?
Wes just felt like maybe I would be a good addition to the show. He saw how nuts I was about Bigfoot and how much I love the subject. And he, maybe he thought that a female voice being on there would be good.
Oh, so you were actually a cast member.
A co-host, yeah. I was a co-host for about a year.
I did not know that.
And then I did a show called Show Notes with Shannon, which was kind of like a companion show to Sasquatch Chronicles. I don't even know if you can get Show Notes with Shannon anymore, but and I'm kind of glad about that because those were, of course, my first interviews ever solo.
The merchandising on that show notes for Shannon would be fantastic. Like a little show nuts for Shannon, like a little companion size peanuts or something?
I mean, it would be. I think that those are, goodness knows where all those are. I mean, like I had Linda Godfrey on, and like, all these cool people that I had probably no business even talking to back then. And, but it gave me my chops, and, it was like, it was on Blog Talk Radio. So it was live, right? So
Oh, nice.
live to archive. So it was like Feet to the Fire, which, I mean, that was, I credit Wes with the whole thing. So, thanks to him, that's why I'm sitting here now. But
So
yeah,
where have
go
you
ahead.
been Bigfooting? I think that's the,
hmm
the interesting thing about Bigfoot is that, and we've had Russell Accord on, we've had some Bigfoot people on, and when I was a kid, I remember going to Tri-City Drive-In and watching Legend of Boggy Creek, and as a kid, it scared the crap out of me. But you did not think that there were Sasquatch in Ohio, for example, and now as years go by, you're finding, oh my gosh, there's sightings everywhere. So where are the spots that you've been out Bigfooting?
Yeah. So of course, Washington State. I have been to Ohio, which I did live there for a couple of years, Judge, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Texas, to the Sam Houston National Forest. That was one of the trips with Wes. The other one to Washington State, which incredible auditory experience happened up there, was also with Wes. And then, of course, just anywhere that I would go that had woods. I've been to Kentucky for the same reason. A lot of caves in Kentucky, so it adds to the mystery of, well, where do they live? Do they stay in the caves? Is there anything subterranean that we don't know about? Do they hang out with the Hadles, like from The Descent? We don't know. But I've been to really so many incredible places specifically for Bigfoot, and I think one of the strangest things that ever happened to me while I was Bigfooting and I apologize to anyone that's heard me say this, because I'm sure you're going to roll your eyes because you're like, oh, here she goes again with this thing. But we were out in Washington State, and I can tell the whole story about, the other things going on at this property, but it was the Brown property, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that property in Washington State, but it's on an Indian reservation, and they captured the basically it's called the linebacker on the ridge thermal, and
Yes.
it looks like pretty much like Jay Cutler without a shirt, in the top part of his torso from his pecs up, and you can see these massive traps and a ridge head. I don't know how you'd fake such a thing. People, of course, had all kinds of theories on that, including a cow. I'm not sure how that would even happen, to make a cow into that shape. But anyhow.
Are you wearing a Jay Cutler jersey right now as we speak?
Totally. In fact,
Okay,
I'm getting
I'm
paid a
just
lot of
checking.
money to drop his name a couple times, so just let
I'm
me
just
go,
checking.
okay?
I just checked.
I think he lives out here in Vegas, I think. Maybe.
Well, he is divorced, I believe, recently divorced.
Not for long. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I had
Jay
to.
Cutler, if you're listening,
Yeah.
I think he's a big fan of our page.
if you'd like to
Yeah, he
venture
is.
into the fray.
Yes.
That's right. And go.
So
From the
Shannon,
shop.
you mentioned that you lived in Ohio for a bit of time.
Mhm.
As a side note, and I know I probably mentioned this, I don't know if I have, I went to law school with the Matt Moneymaker.
Yeah, we've mentioned that.
So, but for some of our new listeners, so Matt Moneymaker and I went to law school together. I knew who he was. I did not know that he was out Bigfooting until way after the fact. But I think he said on one of his shows, his first Bigfoot that he witnessed was in Mohegan State Park, which is
Right.
close to Mansfield, where Jason's located. And so if for our Ohio listeners, a lot of people have been to Mohegan. But if you watch one of the Finding Bigfoot shows, they were there. And
Yeah.
They went over to Landell's Castle, which is really cool. And so, there's Bigfoot, Sasquatch sightings everywhere. I mean, not just Western United States and stuff like that. So did you ever have any Bigfoot experiences in Ohio, Shannon?
Yes, actually, another interesting auditory experience happened at Salt Fork State Park. And again, possible eye roll coming for some folks, but it happened at the aptly named Bigfoot Ridge, which is part of the primitive campground, meaning there is no power, no running water, nothing like that. So we had actually run into a gentleman that started to set up camp just like 2 spots over from us. And he comes over because I have my face down in the dirt. I'm looking around doing this. And he's like, what you doing over there? Oh, just looking around for, animal sign. And I noticed that his van was just chock full of stuff. I mean, in fact, I think he was, if I remember correctly, he was sleeping in the van. And he told me that he drove every other week 400 miles to get there. And I just went, wow, you really like this place, huh? And he goes, yeah, I'm studying animal migration patterns. And I go, are you here for Bigfoot? And he's like, yeah. So, you have to kind of tread lightly with that stuff, right? So we meet this guy. His name is Robert. Wonderful man. I need to check in with him. He had a sighting directly behind the primitive camp at Salt Fork State Park just months prior. And that was why he was so obsessed. The man... it was a beat up van. You could tell it's not like he had a ton of money in this RV and like all this bad to the bone equipment. He would come there every other weekend and drive 400 miles to get there. Not even kidding. So tell me he didn't see what he said he saw, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and he would come out there by himself and he's like, my wife gets so mad, but I'm just so obsessed with this stuff. He saw it was nearly 8 foot tall, Bigfoot, and a smaller one around 5 feet, 5.5 feet, peeking around a tree, literally basically right behind the very campsite that we were both at. And nobody else was, luckily, they would have thought we were total weirdos at this site the entire weekend. So that very night, we go behind the campsite, just down this Forest Service road, which is cleared really nicely. And he pulls out a glow stick. It's like 10 o'clock. And I'm like, hey, what you got going on there, Robert? And it's almost kind of like you mentioned Matt Moneymaker. It was a little Finding Bigfoot to me because he attached a string to it and he starts to whir this thing around. It's making this great sound like Crocodile Dundee, and he gets on the top of the hill and he's calling the Aborigines in, right? So he's whirring this thing around. We're taking turns doing this. And we would just stop and listen. Another person get up, whir it around for a little while. And I know that you know, but for those that don't know, if you go into Salt Fork State Park, it is unlike going to a place like in a lot of places like Utah, where there's not a lot of ground brush. In Salt Fork, forget it. You better get out your machete, and bushwhack your way if it's not already cleared, because you got thorns and brambles and it is very thick. And right where we were surrounded by said brush. And talking about brush, 4 feet high, at least, maybe 3.5, 4 feet tops. And we had been out there for a couple of hours. We had stopped to take a couple big breaks and just chat quietly. We didn't hear anything come in. It was a still, quiet night, no activity whatsoever. And I had just got done whirring the thing, and directly within that ground brush was talking like ground level, not in a tree, a very, very loud monotone whistle, like something with lips. And I just picture something with a massive set of lines. I can't even describe it. And even if I had recorded it, which no, I wasn't recording, it wouldn't come across. As you know, those things are really difficult to get. So I instinctively just go from a standing position to a crouching position, I guess, just to make myself smaller. It just is what it primevally came to my mind to do, because it was right in front of us. But we couldn't see anything, of course. This brush was so thick, but it blew my mind, because anything moving through there would have made the most loud, god-awful sound. I don't know how, whatever it was. I'm not saying for sure that it was a Bigfoot. I'm not saying that, because unless you see it, you can't say that, right?
Right.
But if it was a bird, it was the most screwed up, out of his mind, he grew lips and a massive set of lungs bird, the loudest thing I've ever heard from a bird. Or the freaking pterodactyl. I don't know. But
pterodactyl would open up a whole nother can of worms.
Yes.
We're going to explain one cryptid with another, that's how we do it.
It might be better than a Bigfoot.
Going right to the Thunderbird.
I should have been talking to it. Caw.
How do you not like in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
just not turn around and run? I mean, because I've been out there once in the woods.
Yeah.
And it's just, I can't imagine, I mean, not once just in my life, but once looking for something like this. I can't imagine something being that close and making that noise and not running.
It was really a stunning noise. And it's so hard to sit here and try to impart that on anybody. But yeah, I was standing, I went to a crouching position. Running didn't really cross my mind. Maybe that was another, survival instinct not to run. A lot of people say that too, right? I mean, the judge knew better than that, though. He knew he needed to keep running. But
yeah,
you knew.
Well, you didn't have Robert to sacrifice like you did.
Right. I did think about pushing Robert in. So that did cross my mind, actually. I thought, well, he loves it here. He needs to stay here. No, but you know what? Nothing ever happened after that. We stayed there for a really long time and listened, as weird as that was. And it was freaky because it was pitch black out there unless we turned our flashlights on, because we thought, okay, it came in. It's going to leave eventually. Heard nothing. Not a rustle of a leaf. I have no idea what that was to this day, but it was pretty dang cool.
You know, one of the things that I've always pondered, and I started this when I was watching the Finding Bigfoot stuff, is there's a consensus that we don't really know what Bigfoot is. We don't know that this is some sort of, 10,000-year-old, primate that didn't go extinct. There's different theories. Why do we always assume that these things are benevolent and that they're not going to just rip you to pieces? Because from most accounts, these things are predators. They hunt down deer or elk. They kill things. They eat it. They eat meat. You're encroaching upon their territory. I mean, if you went into the jungles of the Congo, and I may even have the wrong country by saying this, but if you went in the jungles of the Congo and you stumbled upon a family of silverback gorillas, they'd rip you apart. They would probably kill you. I'm not sure that they're eating your meat. Chimpanzees would. A chimpanzee would rip you apart and eat you. Why do we just assume that Bigfoot is this benevolent creature that we don't really have to be scared of? And if you would run into one in the woods, and you know what I mean? I got to believe that I'm not going out anywhere without a gun.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And I have to say that a lot of people forget the fact that when the Native Americans were talking about and writing about these things, they were talking about them taking their women and, taking people for food, or taking their women for other reasons, that we don't need to talk about, or taking their children, and that they were to be respected and feared at the same time. And there are a couple of stories in my book that do speak to the fact that these things are possibly not very nice. But why should they be if we're traipsing around through their living room? And especially if you get close to their young, I think is when you could possibly be in a really, really bad situation. I mean, one of the stories in my book, a kid sees a massive, around 10 feet tall, I think it was, grayish white colored Bigfoot. And in one hand, it was holding the top half of a dog, okay, with the innards hanging out. And the other hand was basically like a plaid piece of clothing or a blanket. And to this day, he says the more disturbing thing was not the dog. It was the fact that, was that the dog's blanket or the human owner's clothing? Was it part of
They had been walking the dog.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
yeah, I just don't. I'm with you, Shannon. I don't get why people were going to go trouncing out in their living room, shall we say? And I mean, because you think about any normal animal. If you run into a black bear and it has a cub, it's going to attack you. You run into just about anything. I have these feral cats that live at my house that I can't get rid of them. But if you get
Not
near
the
one of their,
feral cat
but if you
story.
get near one of their kittens, I'm telling you, you get near one of their kittens, they're hissing at you and everything else. And I'm like, dude, I'm feeding you. I give you food every day. Why are you going to hiss at me?
Speaking of black bear, did you see the video of the guy snoozing by his pool and the black bear? It was in Massachusetts, I think. And the black bear kind of saunters up, kind of sniffs the guy's foot and like kind of nudges it. And the guy wakes up and the bear just turns and scampers away.
Oh, man.
Like the guy's dead asleep by the pool, and the black bear just.
But if that same guy would have walked
probably.
into and found, in between a young, they would have killed him. So I don't know. I see these shows and I hear about these people and they're out there, Bigfooting, and I'm like, you guys aren't taking guns. No, why would we do that? I'm
well,
like,
even besides the Bigfoot thing, the gun thing, to me, I always bring it up, and I think it's so important because forget the Bigfoot, because honestly, if you run into a large, forget it, not even that large of a Bigfoot, 6 foot or 7 foot, an average Bigfoot, do you really think that your gun is going to stop it unless you place it directly like behind an eyeball or something? Are you that good of a shot? It's really for other things like freaky people, which you can see all the time, the bears, the cougars. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things want to eat you out there, and you're looking real delicious to them. So, but you know what, guys, the other side of that is, do you remember the story of little Casey, 2 or 3 year old in North Carolina that went missing for like 5 days? I mean,
you mean where the bear took care of him?
The quote unquote bear. Yeah.
The bear took care of him.
Right. Which is not really, they're not really known to do something like that. It's not impossible, but it's kind of weird because the kid was saying like, yeah, it brought me something. I can't remember. Forgive me, everybody. I can't remember what exactly. He said the bear brought him something, to eat and all that.
Right. And that kid's frame of reference, his frame of reference would have been something big, hairy in the woods, had been a bear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the Jungle Book. Baloo's not.
Yeah. I mean, so, I think there are two sides to this subject, but for the most part, if you're going in the woods, take a gun, have your head on a swivel, and just know that you're not the top of the food chain out there, period.
More than likely not. Yeah.
No. Did Seth, was it Seth that did the documentary from Loudonville, called The Back 40? Was that?
No.
Okay, who did?
No.
Yeah, that's it's on Amazon Prime. It's Loudonville, which is right over there where Mohican is. These family own this farm and this back 40 acres, and they kept getting basically, Bigfoot encounters, somewhat menacing, somewhat not. Ohio.
Now, did they think at first that they were friendly? So were they kind of doing one of those habituation situations where they were putting stuff out for the Bigfoot, or it was completely just they were coming in and they did not invite them?
Yeah, they just came in. They didn't invite them.
Yeah.
And they were, and if my memory serves me correctly, they thought there was obviously multiples traveling in groups.
And isn't that interesting? Because maybe I should watch that, because I'm wondering, and maybe you can answer this, were they coming, during certain times of the year? Because the theory, of course, is, and it would make sense, like every other animal, they travel for food and water, and times of the year they're in certain areas.
Well, back to Robert. What did he conclude if he was driving 400 miles every other weekend to come? I mean, and studying. Or was he not really studying the migration of animals? That was just his pickup line.
I mean, he kind of was, though, because he would be studying the trees, and he would look, and he got me even looking at this thing, because there were certain marks on the trees, and he would say, well, I don't know for sure, but I think that this is them marking these trees. And he wasn't sure why. But, this campsite was close to a couple of ravines, which if you look down in the ravines, unless you were down there, you couldn't quite see was at the bottom of it. It was one of the, another very brushy part of Ohio, very thick underbrush there in some places, very near the lake. So it was advantageous for them to be there. But he definitely did think he was on board with these things moving in basically migrational patterns.
Like, did he think they were, as the winter came, moving south, like down into Kentucky and West Virginia? Or just different parts of Ohio. Because it's not like Ohio's elevation changes so much.
Right.
They could come down out of the mountains, and they can out on the west coast or whatever. So, I mean,
I can't quite remember exactly what all he said as far as the migration goes, but I do remember having a conversation with him about a time of year like that would have snow on the ground or something like that. Maybe not super heavy, but him saying that, oh, I've seen tracks in this area and this and that, which other than a muddy area, a lot of substrates are not conducive to tracks in a lot of parts of the country, unless it's wet or there's snow. So that's why, if you've come across an incredible, even especially a trackway, forget about it. Like, you got to try to cast that stuff. So,
I think some people anticipate you're just going to be walking in the woods and you're going to see Bigfoot prints. It's not how it works. I mean, the amount of pressure that you have to put on ground in order to leave a print, I mean, it's a lot. So you're not going to just find Bigfoot tracks unless there's really soft soil, mud or snow or whatever. So
yeah,
I think it's unreasonable for people to think, oh, well, I'm just going to go find Bigfoot tracks. And if they don't find one, that means they're not there.
It's so few and far between. And plus, if these things are as smart as we all do believe that they are, I think they're masters of their environment. I think especially if they're in an area where there are people that for the most part they want to avoid, they are very cognizant of where they're placing their feet. I do think that.
So we just had Linda Godfried on, and we asked her, because Wes asked me what I thought, whether Dogman was a real biological creature or was it a, some sort of supernatural thing. And so we discussed it, and then he went on to say the same thing about Bigfoot. So interesting. What's your take? I think Wes's take is that Bigfoot, as well as Dogman, are, yes, they have a corpus, a body, they're biological, but they can pass back and forth. They're dimensional creatures. And we talked about seeing orbs and things like that. So now that we have you here, what's your take?
Just real quick, did he bring up the orb that we saw in Washington State?
Probably not.
Not on the show. I mean, he and I were talking after the fact.
I gotcha. Oh, and if I may, before I answer that, I will. The point that I was going to make with the Brown property and that Jay Cutler thermal, there's another grand for me. I'm just kidding. But was the fact that we were out there for Bigfoot. Obviously, we're at the Brown property, and all of us were. It was Wes, myself, Wes's girlfriend, John Brown, who owns the property, and Kirk Brandenburg, a friend of theirs who also happened to own like this, I don't know, like $4,000 or $5,000 FLIR thermal, which if any Bigfooter can afford any FLIR thermal, I highly recommend it, because when something sounds real loud and scary and it's a Bigfoot, whip that thing up, you're going to see it's, 90% of the time it's going to be a squirrel or a raccoon or something that sounds like really super loud. So those are just indescribably wonderful tools. Anyhow, it started to rain very heavily. It's like 1 or 2 in the morning. And Sarah Brown had told us, fine, go traipsing around the property. Don't care where you go. Don't go to, these abandoned buildings on this part of the property. We're like, okay. Well,
so
mostly,
that's exactly
that's where we went. Yeah. She said it mostly to John, but that's where we went. But also, can I just say in my defense, in case Sarah ever listens to this, it did start raining cats and dogs. We're in Washington State. It was cold, too.
And you suspected that's where they had Jay Cutler chained.
Oh, I like you earning more money. Let's do this. I'll split it with you guys. Yeah, here we go. Supplements. Woo, lifting. Woo. Yeah, so it starts to rain cats and dogs, and we make our way to this abandoned building. And the roof is intact, but inside the walls are kind of like mostly 2x4s, and you can kind of see the woods and the ravine, out the quote-unquote front of this building, which is halfway there. So we're inside and we're waiting for the rain to calm down. A little chilly outside, not pleasant. So we didn't want to be out there. And we all just see this light in the woods. All of us. We're like, what in the world? Look at this fool out here in the rain and the cold. What is this guy doing? Now, this is not a super, unpopulated area. It's rural, but it's got people. So we're just thinking this is some like drunk guy out here 2 a.m. getting drenched in the cold. So we go to the side of the building that is mostly open, and we're just watching, and it's kind of this bluish, whitish light. I think a few of us thought it was a different color than the other, but that might just be human biology at play. But it's kind of bobbing. It looks just like a guy with a headlamp on running through the woods. And it's like we all get to the front part of this building, and it's like the light notices us noticing it. The second we all get there, and we're literally like pointing and looking, it falls at an angle 45 degrees to the ground, gone. And Kurt quickly gets his FLIR up, and he's like, I got no heat signature. I can't find anything. We go out the quote unquote actual door of the barn. Wes, myself, John, and Wes's girlfriend. We go out the door. Kurt goes over one of the 2x4s so that he can FLIR like constantly. And he's still going, I don't see anybody. And there is a metal covered building next to this other building. And someone or something hits the side of this metal building. Boom, boom, boom. Extremely loud. Scares the crap out of the 2 people that had wandered further up front. I think it was Wes and his girlfriend. His girlfriend comes booking it back. Like, forget this. I'm out of here. This is not cool. We make our way out to the lip of this ravine, and I'm like, Kirk, is there a guy over there or what? He's like, it's not a person. I got nothing. And to this day, and there was nobody on the other side of the barn. To this day, can't explain it. And the thing about the eye roll, what I brought up earlier, was because I don't want to be in the camp that Bigfoot is anything but flesh and blood. I want them to be that. I want Dogman to be that, because we'll never find out what in the world is going on if they're anything else. But to see what I have heard about for so many years, a light in the woods, when it comes to Bigfooting, you're out Bigfooting and there's a light in the woods, I was like, this cannot be happening. I was almost like, this is cool, but I'm kind of ticked off right now, because it happened to us at that property. And at that same property, we played a baby cry. Wes pulled up something on YouTube, like a loop of a baby cry, something enough to make you like totally lose your mind after, an hour. We had been playing it. Yeah, it was bad. Totally.
An hour.
Yeah.
It takes you an hour to lose your mind over a baby cry.
Yeah, we were very patient. Dude, it's Bigfooting, you got to suck it up. So, yeah, we're playing it for like good 45 minutes straight. And something came in, and it reminded me a lot of my Salt Fork experience, to where you can picture something, but you can't see it. So you can't say Bigfoot, but you can picture what's making the sound. And we all heard it. And it was something going whoop, 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 just like that, over and over again, always in threes. And even Wes and I look at each other and we go, does that sound feminine to you? Like, it sounded feminine. And we're like, well, that's kind of weird because we're playing a baby cry. And the second the phone died, because we had been playing it for nearly an hour, the second the phone died, all sound stopped. So no more whoops, no more nothing. So that property was very, very active. The question of, do I think they're 100% flesh and blood? Short answer, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want them to be anything paranormal. But what if they just have like cool attributes, like a cuttlefish or something, or an octopus, where they can just change their skin? I don't know. That's also.
Well, the thing about it is, like, okay, so looking at things, you apply Occam's razor.
Mm-hmm.
and you say, okay, what is the most likely answer? What's the simplest answer? I mean, the simplest answer is that they're a biological creature. I mean, the fact that they make whooping sounds is consistent with primates.
So what's the simplest answer to the light?
I'll get to that.
Oh.
Oh, he's got.
All
I
right.
like this.
So
All right.
Drop the mic and he would have walked away if our earbuds were.
Yeah,
right.
dude. Yeah,
Now
if you
we're
weren't
cheating to
connected, he'd be
cheat.
gone.
So the simplest answer is, so you have to look at things and say, okay, from just a biological, what eyewitnesses are describing perfectly fit something that would fall into the primate category. And the nesting, like, they find these nests, gorillas make nests. The whooping sound, if you've ever been to the Columbus Zoo, you get down there by the gibbons, oh my gosh, they're just whoop, 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 whoop. I mean, drive you nuts. I'd rather listen to the baby crying for an hour. But
I mean, don't push it.
yeah. And we know they eat. So they eat. So biological creatures eat. We know that they have offspring because we talk about, small Bigfoot. Biological creatures have offspring. They mate and things like that. So the simplest answer is, yeah, these are just pretty intelligent bipedal hominid primates, whatever you want to call them, and we just haven't found a body yet because we haven't. So then you have to say, well, yeah, but we consistently are seeing these orbs. How many people have seen orbs? Well, okay, now you have to take that Occam's razor and say, well, the more complex answer is that these are supernatural beings that are somehow able
That's
to.
Simple.
And I don't think it is, but that's the point. But that's my point. When you look at Occam's razor says these are not multi-dimensional beings; they're just biological creatures. But the interesting thing is, when we were talking with Linda Godfrey, Dogman sightings, people have sort of the same thing. They're seeing these orbs. And she totally blew us away because I never expected for her to say, I think these are multi-dimensional beings. It just totally blew us away because I've read 2 or 3 of her books and she's never said anything like that. But the interesting thing that she threw out there was that people who have come in contact with these orbs develop cancer. That she herself had multiple contacts with these orbs. She developed cancer. And that, look, anybody can get cancer. It's a terrible disease. But there is a disproportionate amount of people who are investigators who've come in contact with these orbs versus the general public. And that really kind of blew me away. And then, talked to Wes about seeing these orbs. So I don't know. I'm still, if I'm still coming down like you, Shannon, I'm still leaning towards they're biological creatures, but obviously I can't figure out what the coincidence would be of these orbs that people are constantly seeing. And with Linda's case, she described, if anybody listens to our podcast, she described this basketball-sized orb that was clearly had some sort of intelligence behind it, the way it was moving and how it approached their car. It was a fascinating story. Now, my personal experience when I was out on Temple Road, I never saw any orbs or anything like that. So that might be a good segue into.
How do you know there wasn't an orb 6 rows into the cornfield? And that's well,
I don't.
Okay.
That's true,
but
Judge.
the
You're
orbs,
right.
orbs illuminate some sort of light. I didn't see any light. So Shannon, you had mentioned, Shannon, you had mentioned that you had some patronage listeners that had some questions for me. Maybe this would be the good time to answer those.
And also, can I just say that, and I'm not just saying that because you invited me on your show and all that, and you're in the book and all that. Your episode is definitely one of my favorites. It gets brought up all the time. And how cool is it that guy went out to Temple Road and had the coroner there behind him
that
and
was
took
awesome.
the picture there.
Awesome.
That was so cool. So if that doesn't prove that, that is a very powerful story and powerful episode, that does it. So thank you very much for being willing to come on. I don't know when that was, like March or April 2019 or something that you came on, and that was always sticking with folks. So yeah, so a couple of no, go ahead.
The best part was so the judge was on Wes's show there, and the next day I got a text from one of our friends who just bought a house literally at the corner of Flickinger Road at Temple Road. He didn't really know the story, and he invited me out to his house that night. He's like, hey, was it Labor Day weekend? Yeah. And he goes, hey, we're gonna have a bonfire. And I said, I'm gonna send you something, and then after you listen to it, then you can understand why I'm not coming out to sit behind your house at the edge of the woods.
Because he's right there at the edge of the woods where the origins.
Because this road, there's been a couple of houses built here recently in the woods, but there's still really nothing out there for that 1.5 or 2 miles.
Which is interesting because the guy that sent the photo, even though it's pretty, tight in, you can tell that. I mean, that's not. If somebody has a cornfield, it's going to be a big cornfield, and the corn is still there. So, Judge, when is the last time that you were in that area?
Oh, I've driven out there. I live probably 6-7 miles away from it. At the most. So, I've been out there multiple times. So it's really, other than that woods right there at the corner, it's kind of unchanged. They built about 3 houses in that woods, but it's still, depending upon what year it is, on the one side, you're talking a straight mile of nothing but corn.
Yeah.
And if you're a city person, I don't think you get that. A mile of corn, unbroken.
And we have driven, I drove down that road coming back from another town, and I actually called him as I was driving down it, and I said, this is crazy to think back that any of us were stupid enough to be out there at night, and then when we got,
he just called you stupid.
Hey, well, it's not the first time, and to get up to the corner and then to really look at where your house was.
Oh yeah.
And then where our buddy's house was that you ran to,
hey, anybody out there, and I actually had an avid listener of Wes sent me an email and wanted some information about it, and they said, hey, I'd love to come, and when I'm in Ohio, I'm gonna come and see it. I said, hey, shoot me an email. I'll give you a tour of it. I'll take you out there and show you exactly where things were. And she just was blown away. So, yeah, any listeners out there, if you ever want a tour of Temple Road from the judge,
we were actually
play-by-play.
Yeah, we were actually this fall, was probably next week, we had it planned with a bed and breakfast in the area. We were going to have Amy Boo was going to come and the guys from Paranormal Road, and we were going to have like a paranormal weekend at this bed and breakfast outside of Bucyrus. And the Saturday night part of it was we were going to take everybody who got rooms at the bed and breakfast out to Temple Road and walk down the road at night.
Judge, you were going to walk that road?
Yeah, we were.
Well, you get a group of people, and I got a gun.
We had
buddy, he's going to pick you right out. He's like, I remember you.
He's 30-some years old. He's got to be.
Hey, he's got offspring. They have to reproduce.
That's true. Grover's like, he's timeless, man. He's a multi-dimensional being.
Now, what the judge does not very often mention when he tells the story on many of the podcasts was that, so this event this happened, and the very next night, because we were all in high school, the very next night we were together at one of our friends' house who was on Route 4, just down the road, maybe another mile. Okay. And then as a bunch of high school guys back in those days, we got together and we played poker. Okay. And we were sitting out in this guy's garage right along Route 4, not very far from, and he tells us this story. Okay. But like he said, he left out the part of telling us that he actually saw what he saw. And so, okay, under the guise of, I didn't want you guys to make fun of me and stuff like that, but then again, he left us out in this wide open garage less than a mile away, while he knows there's
something out there,
like this big creature that just. And when he told us the story, and yes, some of the guys made fun of him because, oh, it was a deer, oh, it was a dog, or no pun intended for the dog man, but
Yeah.
but the guys, I mean, I remember the guys just kind of, oh, whatever, it's just your imagination.
So, Judge, you left out pretty much just the part where it came bursting out of the corn. The only time that you actually saw it. Yeah.
Right. And you got to understand something. It's 16 years old.
Folks, we're out of time for this week's episode. So tune in next week where your host, Shane Grove, along with the judge, will continue this amazing interview with Shannon LeGro, the host of the Into the Fray podcast. Until next week, never shy away from what may be lurking in the darkness. We are out.